The stem of my wine glass rattled between my fingers, a tiny tremor that didn't match the composure on my face. Candlelight flickered over polished silver and crystal, over my parents' carefully curated dining room, over the smile on my sister's lips that looked like kindness if you didn't know her. I did. I heard the blade hidden in her voice long before she swung it. You judge other people's families? Lauren, because you don't have one of your own. The words landed like a slap. For a heartbeat, all the sounds of the engagement dinner, cutlery, low conversations, the soft jazz playlist, fell away. There was only the roar in my ears and the way my chest tightened around air that suddenly felt too thick to breathe. I'm a family court judge. People throw ugliness at me every day. Accusations, tears, rage. I know how to absorb impact. But this wasn't a stranger on a witness stand. This was Brooke, my parents' golden child. The one they always said just needed a little more understanding, while they expected me to be the unbreakable one. Before I could answer, a chair scraped back sharply. Adrian, her fiancé, pushed away from the table. He didn't look at Brooke. He looked directly at me. You're the judge tonight, he said quietly, voice cutting through the hush. So tell them what happened 5 years ago. My heart stuttered. The room tilted just a fraction. My mother's eyes darted between us. Confused. My father's hand tightened around his napkin until his knuckles went white. Brooke's face had lost all its color. He knows? The realization crawled up my spine like ice. Somehow, Adrian had found what I had buried under 5 years of silence and self-preservation. The secret I'd wrapped in family peace and duct-taped shut with my own guilt. This isn't the time, my mother whispered. This is exactly the time, Adrian replied, still watching me. If she's going to be part of this family, they deserve the truth. All of it. The weight of decades pressed in on me. Favoritism, casual cruelty, my parents' endless excuses for Brooke. The way my pain was always too inconvenient to name. For a long, suspended second, I considered swallowing it down again, smiling, deflecting, letting the rot sink deeper. Then I realized something terrifying. If I stayed silent now, I was choosing her over the one person who had never had a voice in any of this. My voice came out calmer than I felt. 5 years ago, I began. Brooke called me at 3 in the morning. She flinched. She was at a motel off Route 17. Her voice was slurred. She begged me not to tell Mom and Dad. I saw my mother shift in her chair, discomfort swimming in her eyes. My father's jaw set, but he didn't speak. He never did when it came to Brooke. Silence was his favorite form of loyalty. When I got there, I continued. She was on the floor, bruised, shaking, high enough that she could barely focus. There was blood on the pillowcase. And in the corner of the room, there was a little girl, barefoot, filthy, no shoes, no coat, 2 years old. My cousin's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My aunt closed her eyes like she already knew where this was going and just couldn't bear to watch it arrive. Her name was Maya, I said, Brooke's daughter. None of us knew she existed, not even me. The silence in the room thickened. This family loves secrets, I thought bitterly. But they love the illusion of normal even more. I took them to the hospital. Brooke was high. Maya was malnourished, had an ear infection and a fever. Child Protective Services got involved. They were going to place Maya in foster care. I swallowed hard, feeling the stem of the glass dig into my palm. I couldn't let that happen, so I took her home. I became her guardian, her bedtime, her nightmares, her therapy sessions, her laughter. All of it was mine. I loved her more than I've ever loved anything in my life. Across the table, Brooke looked like she'd been punched. You gave her up, she rasped. I gave her back to you. I said, my control cracking for the first time. After you got out of rehab, after you promised me you'd changed, after you told me that James was ready to help you raise her, I believed you. I wanted to believe you. Brooke's eyes were glassy, but her chin lifted in defiance. She always thought defiance was the same thing as strength. What none of you know, I said, is that 2 months after I let Maya go, I ended up in the hospital. Emergency surgery, ruptured appendix, massive infection. I survived, but there were complications. They had to remove more than they'd planned. I was left infertile. My mother gasped softly. My father stared down at his plate. No one reached for me. No one said, "I'm sorry." Of course they didn't. I hadn't given them the chance. I hadn't trusted them with the unsanitized version of my pain. "I never told you," I said, "because I didn't want your pity. And because I wanted peace." I looked straight at Brooke, but that peace was bought with my silence. With your jokes? With every time you mocked me about not having kids. Even after you knew. Especially after you knew. I turned to Adrian. "You found something?" He nodded. "Court records. Foster care files. After she left you." "Lauren." His voice hardened. "She walked out on Maya again. Left her with James when they broke up. He called social services. Maya went into the system. The room spun. For a second, I thought I might pass out. I had spent 5 years telling myself she was okay, that my sacrifice had meant something. Instead, my niece had been shuffled between strangers while I stood behind a bench, lecturing other people about the best interests of their children. Brooke shoved her chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "You had no right to bring this up here." She snapped at Adrian. "You had no right to expose me. You exposed yourself the moment you mocked your sister," he said flatly, knowing exactly what she lost. My chest burned. "This isn't about what I lost," I said quietly. "This is about what Maya lost. Twice. Because you chose yourself, twice." My mother finally found her voice. "Lauren, please. We don't need to do this in front of everyone. You're humiliating your sister?" And there it was. Exactly the reaction I'd expected and still, somehow, hoped not to get. I set my glass down carefully. Like the smallest wrong move might shatter everything in front of me. "I didn't do this to her," I said. "She did it to herself. I'm done protecting her from her own choices while a 7-year-old pays the price." My father's voice was ice. "You're tearing this family apart." I met his eyes and, for the first time in my life, didn't look away. "No," I said. "The rot was always here. I just flipped the lights on." I left my coat on the chair, my wine untouched. I walked out into the cold night with my heart pounding and something old and heavy finally breaking loose inside me. That night, I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop, pulled up the state portal I knew too well from the other side of the bench, and filed an emergency inquiry with Child Protective Services. If Maya was still out there, I was going to find her. The caseworker's call came 2 days later, just after dawn, when the sky was that colorless gray that makes everything look tired. I'd left my phone on loud, something I never do, and the shrill ring cut through the silence of my apartment. "Lauren Hayes?" the woman asked. Her voice was steady. "Practiced, yes. This is she. This is Carla Grant with Child Protective Services. You submitted an emergency inquiry regarding a minor. Maya Caldwell." My knees went weak just hearing her name in someone else's mouth. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Yes, I was her temporary guardian 5 years ago. I raised her for 11 months. She called me Aunt Lo." There was the slightest pause, a softening in her tone. "All right, we've located her. She's currently placed with a foster mother in Fairview. Name is Dana Reed." "Miss Reed specializes in cases involving attachment trauma." I closed my eyes, exhaling shakily. "Is she safe?" Another pause. "She is now, but she hasn't had an easy few years. She's been in care for about 3 years. Multiple placements? 4 before this one. There have been some behavioral challenges, which is expected given her history." Behavioral challenges. I pictured a tiny girl screaming into a void because no one stayed long enough to teach her that the world wouldn't always disappear on her. "Can I see her?" I asked. "I'm considering filing for custody. I need to know how she is. I need her to know I didn't just vanish." "We'll need to verify your previous guardianship first," Carla said. "Documentation, court orders, any medical or school records from when she lived with you." "I have all of it," I said immediately. "Every file. I never deleted a single email. Tell me what you need and I'll send it today." Carla took my information, explaining the process in clinical, but not unkind terms. When I hung up, my hands were trembling so badly I had to set the phone down before I dropped it. I'm a judge, I thought. I have sentenced people, altered the course of lives with a paragraph and a signature. But in that moment, I felt like a supplicant pounding on the doors of a system I'd always pretended was fairer than it really is. 3 days later, I was parked in front of a white bungalow in Fairview, my car idling as I stared at the toys scattered across the small lawn. A plastic tricycle, a faded soccer ball, cracked sidewalk chalk drawings leading up to the front steps like a breadcrumb trail of color. I sat there for 10 minutes, hands clenched on the steering wheel, heart punching against my ribs. What if she didn't remember me? What if she did, and she hated me? How many times had she asked why I left? Finally, I forced myself out of the car and up the walkway. My knock sounded small on the door, like something a child would do. The woman who opened it looked to be in her early 50s, gray threaded through dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail. No makeup. Clear, assessing eyes that took in every detail of me in a breath. "You must be Lauren," she said. "I'm Dana." Her voice held neither warmth nor hostility, just a careful neutrality that told me she didn't trust easily. I respected her instantly. "Thank you for letting me come," I said. She stepped aside. "We have a bit of time before Maya gets home from school. Come in." The house smelled like tomato sauce and laundry detergent. The living room was lived in but tidy, with shelves of children's books, board games, a basket overflowing with stuffed animals. My chest ached looking at it. My old apartment had once looked like a grown woman had quietly rearranged her entire life around a small, chaotic center of gravity. On the refrigerator, held up by magnets shaped like fruit, was a drawing. There was a house, a crooked tree, two stick figures holding hands. Underneath, in unsteady, childish letters, someone had written, "Me and Aunt Elle." I walked closer, my breath catching. "She still remembers," I whispered. Dana stepped beside me. "She doesn't talk about you often," she said, "but when she does, it's consistent." Aunt Elle who sang the dinosaur song. Aunt Elle who made pancakes shaped like animals. Aunt Elle who smells like oranges and coffee. It was such a small, specific detail that my eyes burned. I'd always zested oranges into my coffee cake batter on Sunday mornings. I never knew that tiny sensory habit had branded itself into her memory. "How is she?" I asked. "Really?" Dana's eyes softened. "Just a fraction. She's cautious. Smart as hell. Funny. When she lets herself be, she tests people. Hard. She's been moved too many times. And she expects everyone to leave eventually. So she tries to prove she doesn't need them first." I swallowed. "I want to be tested." Dana studied me for a long moment, weighing something I couldn't see. Finally, she nodded. "All right. When she gets home, I'll introduce you as someone who knew her when she was little. That's it. No pressure. No big reveals. We see how she reacts and move from there." "Agreed." "Yes," I said. "Agreed." At 3:43 p. The school bus pulled up to the curb. My pulse skyrocketed. I heard the front door open, the thump of a backpack hitting the floor, a small voice complaining about math homework. Then she walked into the living room. She was taller, her hair darker, her face sharper in ways that come from growing and in ways that come from hurting. But her eyes, wide, searching, wary, were exactly the same. "Maya," Dana said gently. "This is Lauren. She knew you when you were very little." Maya's gaze flicked to me. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just studied me with this piercing focus that felt far too old for 7. After a long moment, her head tilted slightly. "You're the dinosaur song," she said. Every defense I had left shattered. "Yes," I whispered. "The one about the little dinosaur who is afraid of the dark. And his mom gave him a nightlight made of stars." Her mouth twitched. Almost a smile, almost a flinch. She looked at Dana, then back at me. "I thought you were gone," she said, voice barely audible. I crouched so we were eye level. "I never wanted to leave you," I said. "I thought you'd be safe. I was wrong, but I'm here now, and I'm going to stay as long as you'll let me." She looked down at her shoes, then took one small, cautious step closer. "Can she stay for dinner?" she asked Dana, not taking her eyes off me. If she wants to, Dana said. And if you're okay with that? My throat was too tight to speak. I just nodded. That night, over spaghetti and garlic bread, I didn't push. I didn't try to be funny or charming or unforgettable. I asked about school, about her favorite book. She answered in short sentences, but she didn't shut down. After dessert, she picked up a battered purple bunny from the couch and held it out to me. Do you remember him? She asked. My breath hitched. Sir Hops a lot. I said. I gave him to you after your second nightmare. You said you needed a guard bunny to watch the door. He still watches, she murmured. Then, after a long silence that felt like a test, you only get one chance to pass, she asked quietly. Can you come back tomorrow? I looked at Dana. She can, Dana said. If she means it? Maya nodded once. Fierce and small. I'll be here, I said. And this time, it felt less like a promise and more like a vow. Over the next 2 weeks, my life shrank to a single point on the map. Dana's bungalow in Fairview. I rearranged hearings, traded courtroom slots with colleagues, burned through vacation days I'd been hoarding for a future I once assumed would include my own children. My clerk stopped asking why I always seemed to be rushing out the door at 4 on the dot. Every afternoon, I showed up at that house. Sometimes Maya met me at the door with a guarded, "You're late," even when I wasn't. Sometimes she ignored me for a full 20 minutes, refusing to look at me while she colored or watched cartoons. Sometimes she talked so fast about school, cartoons, and a girl named Bree who stole her pencil that I could barely keep up. It was never the same twice, but every day I came back, and every day she let me in just a little more. Dana would drift in and out of the space, folding laundry in the hallway, taking calls in the kitchen, pretending not to listen as Maya and I rebuilt something neither of us had language for. She'd occasionally catch my eye and give the smallest nod, as if to say, "This is good. Keep going." One afternoon, Maya was working on a spelling list at the kitchen table, chewing the end of her pencil. "How do you spell nightmare again?" she asked, squinting at the paper. "Nightmare." I said automatically. "Why? Is that on your list?" "No," she shrugged. "I just wanted to write it down. Sometimes it helps if I write it. Then it's not just in my head." I swallowed hard. "Does that work?" "Sometimes." She glanced up at me. "Did you have nightmares when you were a kid?" "Yes," I said. "All the time." "What about doors that didn't open when I needed them to? And voices that were loud when I wanted them to be quiet, and quiet when I wanted them to be loud?" She made a face. "That's weird." "Yeah." I smiled faintly. It was, she considered this, then nodded like I'd passed some invisible exam. "Okay," she said. "You can help me with math now." In the quieter moments, after she went to bed, and Dana and I sat with mugs of tea in the dim kitchen, the conversation shifted from everyday repairs to the war I was preparing to start. "You're really going to file for custody," Dana said one night. Not as a question, but as a diagnosis. "I am," I said. "I can't undo the last 3 years. But I can make damn sure the next 10 look different." Dana stirred her tea. "You know her mother's not going to go down without blood." "I know." I stared at the steam curling from my mug. "She already left once, twice. Actually," she walked away, like Maya was a bad habit she could quit when it got too inconvenient. "I came here ready to be the villain in her story if that's what it took to be the hero in Maya's." Dana studied me. "You're not the villain," she said. "You're just going to be the first person in that girl's life who chooses to stay, even when it gets ugly." "I left," I said quietly. "I put her back into Brooke's arms and told myself it was the right thing." "You made a choice based on the information you had," Dana said. "You trusted a sister you wanted to believe. That's not the same as walking away." "Tell that to the little girl who ended up in 4 different homes," I said, because I couldn't imagine my own sister sacrificing her for a clean slate. Dana didn't argue with that. She just reached out and touched my wrist. "Then don't imagine, act." Adrian stepped into the chaos like someone used to walking through fires and checking for survivors. After the engagement dinner detonated, he moved out of Brooke's place and into a short-term rental. I expected him to disappear from my life as neatly as he'd entered it. Instead, he texted me a week after my first visit with Maya. "If you're really going after custody," he wrote, "you're going to need every piece of evidence you can find. I have some. Can we talk?" We met at a cafe near the courthouse, the kind of place full of exhausted attorneys and too strong coffee. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, like the truth had added a few years overnight. "I'm not here to make you feel better about what you did," I said before he could speak. "You stood by while she humiliated me that night. You knew part of the truth and used it like a grenade at dinner." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking how I can help fix what I can." He slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of the child support payments Brooke's been receiving from James's insurance settlement. She kept taking the money even after Maya went into care." I flipped through the pages. Checks, deposits, bank statements. My stomach twisted. She took money for a child she didn't even have. "Yeah," Adrian said bitterly. "Your sister's talent for self-preservation should really be studied." I closed the folder. "This will help. The court needs to see the pattern. Neglect, abandonment, financial exploitation on top of everything else." He hesitated. "Do you want to be her guardian again?" he asked. "Or her mother?" I looked at him, the question landing in a place so deep it almost hurt. "If the law would let me," I said, "I'd be her mother in a heartbeat. But I'll take whatever I can get that means she never has to pack her life into a black trash bag again." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make it as hard as possible for any judge to say no." At home, I pulled out the file box I'd labeled M. Medical records, preschool art, guardianship orders, copies of every appointment summary, every case note. I spread my life with her across my dining table, turning it into a battlefield map. The next time I saw Maya, she was in the backyard, trying to balance on the low brick wall that separated Dana's property from the neighbors. She wobbled, arms outstretched like a tightrope walker. "Careful," I called. "You fall." "I'm not qualified to reattach limbs," she snorted. "You're a judge. You're not qualified for anything fun." "Excuse you. I'm extremely qualified at making dinosaur pancakes." She paused, considering this. "Prove it." And just like that, an ordinary afternoon became sacred. Flour on her nose, syrup on her chin, the sizzling sound of batter on the skillet. She laughed when I flipped the pancake too soon and the tail ripped off. "It's okay," she said. "He can be the dinosaur who lost his tail in battle." Later, when she was drawing him on a piece of printer paper, I watched her tongue stick out in concentration. The way kids do. I realized I was watching a future I wanted more than I had ever wanted a title or a robe or a courtroom. That night, after Maya went to bed, I sat at my laptop, filled out the first set of forms for a custody petition, attached scanned documents from the file box, and hit send. The system I'd once believed I controlled was about to become my judge. Brooke reacted to the petition exactly the way Dana had predicted, like someone whose mask had been ripped off in a crowded room. The day she was served, my phone lit up with a string of calls I let go to voicemail until the notifications stacked on top of each other like a threat. When I finally worked up the nerve to listen, her voice poured through the speaker in distorted, furious bursts. "How dare you?" she screamed. "You vindictive, jealous bitch. You always wanted to be me, and now you're stealing my kid to make it official. Maya is my daughter. You were just the babysitter." There were others, long, incoherent rants about how I'd ruined her life, how I never understood what it was like to struggle, how I'd been waiting for years to take everything from her. I listened to all of them. Then, on the advice of my attorney, I saved them and forwarded copies. Threats. My attorney had said, manipulation. All of it shows the pattern. What he didn't mention, but I felt in my bones, was that underneath every word was the same ugly truth. Brooke had always believed her damage mattered more than my pain. This was just another chapter. She didn't stay confined to voicemails for long. 2 nights before our first hearing, she showed up at my apartment building, pounding on the door hard enough that framed photos rattled on the wall. My neighbors cracked their doors open, their eyes wide and hungry for drama. "Open the door, Lauren," she shrieked. Face me for once instead of hiding behind judges and lawyers. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the door firmly behind me, blocking her view inside. Go home, Brooke, I said. You're drunk. I'm grieving, she shot back. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hair was a mess. I'm grieving the sister who stabbed me in the back. You had 5 years to be a mother, I said quietly. You spent them getting high, disappearing, and cashing child support checks you didn't deserve. I'm not taking your child. I'm just making it official that you already threw her away. She lunged like she might hit me, but stopped short, fingers curling into fists. You think you're better than me because you wear a robe, she spat. You think a judge is going to hand my kid over to some barren, lonely freak who couldn't even keep her once. The words hit where she meant them to. They always did. For a flicker of a second, the old shame rose up. Hospital beds? Doctors saying I'm sorry. Empty nursery plans I'd quietly deleted from my phone. Then I thought of Maya's hand in mine and the way she said, I thought you were gone. I think, I said, that a judge is going to look at who shows up for Maya and who doesn't. And you screaming in my hallway doesn't count as showing up. Her eyes shimmered with something like panic. If you do this, she hissed. If you take this to court, I swear to God I will never forgive you. I almost laughed. Forgiveness. That tired old currency we kept pretending to trade, when really all we'd ever done was write IOUs. You're not the one I need forgiveness from, I said. Go home. Brooke, sleep it off. And maybe, for the first time in your life, think about what Maya needs instead of what you want. She spat at my feet. A quick, ugly gesture that made the woman in 3B gasp. Then she stormed down the hall and out of my life, at least for the moment. The courthouse felt different from the petitioner's side. I'd always known, intellectually, that it did. I'd watched people twist their hands in their laps, watched them stare at me with pleading eyes while I tried to keep my distance for the sake of neutrality, sitting there in a simple black dress instead of my robe, my palms damp against the folder in my lap. I understood it in a way I never had before. You okay? My attorney, Mark, asked under his breath. No, I said. But I'm here. That'll have to be enough. The judge assigned to our case was one I'd sat on panels with before. A woman named Ramirez, known for her impatience with theatrics. She looked from me to Brooke, then to the stack of files in front of her, and sighed like she knew this was going to be a long morning. We went first. Mark laid out the history, my guardianship, the emergency motel night, Maya's injuries, my year of caring for her, Brooke's rehab, the decision to reunify. He presented Dana's statements, Carla's reports, Adrian's evidence of misused child support funds. Dana testified, her voice calm, factual. She talked about Maya's nightmares, her difficulty trusting adults, the way she'd started to stabilize with the routine and the re-emerging connection with me. She asks if Lauren will be there tomorrow, Dana said. Every single night. On the rare days when Lauren can't come, she shuts down, but she doesn't explode. She just goes quiet, like she's preemptively grieving. Brooke's attorney objected to half of it. Most of the objections died quick, irritated deaths under Judge Ramirez's gaze. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and walked to the witness stand, every step feeling like it echoed off the walls. Miss Hayes, Judge Ramirez said, you understand that today you are here not as a member of the bench, but as a party to this case. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I left my robe at home on purpose. A faint smile ghosted across her lips. Good. Tell me why you filed this petition. I didn't look at Brooke. I focused on the judge, on the idea that if I could make one person understand, maybe the rest of it would fall into place. I filed because I made a mistake, I said. I believed my sister when she said she was ready to be a mother. I believed that love plus rehab plus time equaled safety. I gave Maya back because the law told me reunification with a biological parent is the ideal outcome. I took a breath. The law didn't see the way Maya clung to me when I walked out that door. It didn't see or ask if I was coming back. I told myself I was doing the right thing. And for the past 3 years, while she's been shuffled from home to home, I've been telling myself that if something were wrong, someone would tell me. I gripped the edge of the witness box. No one did. I had to find out the hard way that she'd been abandoned again. That she'd gone through exactly what I'd sworn I wouldn't let happen. So now I'm here, not as a judge, not as an expert, just as the woman who failed her once and refuses to fail her again. There was a quiet in the room that felt entirely different from the hush of a normal hearing. Heavier, more personal. I heard a pen drop somewhere behind me. Brooke took the stand after me. She cried. She talked about postpartum depression, about feeling ganged up on, about how hard it was to be compared to the perfect sister who never screwed up. She said she'd only taken the child support money because she planned to get Maya back someday and needed to prepare a stable home. "Do you know where your daughter is living right now?" Mark asked her gently on cross. "Of course," she said, bristling. "With some woman in Fairview." "Dana." "What's her last name?" he asked. Brooke opened her mouth, closed it, stared at him like he'd asked her to recite the periodic table. I don't remember," she said finally. "And you think that forgetting the last name of the woman who has been raising your child is compatible with being a fit parent?" Mark asked. Brooke's jaw clenched. "You're twisting things." Judge Ramirez's expression didn't change, but she wrote something down. When testimony ended, the judge called a brief recess before giving her ruling. People began to shuffle around, whispering. Brooke wouldn't look at me. Adrienne, sitting in the back row, met my eyes and gave me a small, steady nod. I sat very still, hands folded in my lap, and thought of Maya asking if I'd be there tomorrow. Whatever happens, I thought, she will never again have to wonder if I fought for her. When we reconvened, Judge Ramirez's face was as unreadable as ever, but the air in the courtroom had shifted. It always does. In that sliver of time between evidence and verdict, between begging and whatever comes after. "Miss Hayes, Mrs. Caldwell," she began, using my maiden name and Brooke's current one, like we were strangers. "This court's obligation is not to your histories, your resentments, or your need for vindication. It is to the best interests of Maya Caldwell." My heart hammered so loudly I was sure the clerk could hear it. "The evidence," she continued, "shows a clear pattern of instability, substance abuse, neglect, and abandonment on the part of Mrs. Caldwell. It also shows financial misconduct regarding child support funds, which this court will be referring for further investigation." Brooke's shoulders jerked like she'd been slapped. By contrast, Judge Ramirez said, turning slightly toward me, "Mrs. Hayes has demonstrated both a historical and recent commitment to Maya's well-being. She has a stable home, steady employment, a prior bonded relationship with the child, and the support of the current foster placement." I realized I wasn't breathing. I forced air into my lungs, my fingers digging crescents into my palms. "Therefore," the judge said, "this court grants full legal and physical custody of Maya Caldwell to Lauren Hayes, effective immediately." The words rang in my ears, turning into something raw and shimmering and unbelievable. My eyes stung. I heard Dana exhale softly behind me, a sound like relief and grief braided together. "As for visitation," Judge Ramirez added, turning back to Brooke, "any contact between Miss Caldwell and the minor will be at the discretion of Miss Hayes and dependent on Ms. Caldwell's demonstrated sobriety and participation in ongoing treatment. There will be no unsupervised visitation until further order of this court." "You can't do this," Brooke burst out, leaping to her feet. "She's my daughter." Judge Ramirez's gaze was flat. "You had years to act like it," she said. "You did not. Sit down, Miss Caldwell, or I will have you removed." Brooke's attorney tugged at her sleeve. For a wild second, I thought she would actually charge the bench. Instead, she yanked her arm away, shot me a look that could have curdled blood, and stormed out of the courtroom, the door slamming behind her. The sound of it felt weirdly final. The judge's gavel fell. "Court is adjourned." People began to move. I stayed seated, staring at my hands until the tremor in them subsided enough to be functional. When I finally stood, my legs felt unsteady, like I'd been at sea for months and was only just learning how to walk on solid ground again. Adrian approached slowly, as though wary of intruding on something private. You did it, he said, voice low. No, I said, looking past him toward the doorway where Brooke had disappeared. I did what I should have done years ago. The court just finally caught up. He gave a small nod. What now? Now? The word felt bigger than the room. Bigger than the building. It contained school drop-offs and bedtime stories and braces and science fair projects and nights spent holding a grown girl through old nightmares. Now I go pick up my daughter from school, I said, and I tell her she has a home no one can take away. The elementary school's front steps were scattered with kids when I arrived, all backpacks and sneakers and high, bright voices. I stood near the gate, clutching my new stack of custody papers like they were some sort of talisman. When Maya saw me, she didn't walk. She ran, full speed. Backpack bouncing, hair flying, face open in a way I'd never seen before. You're here, she shouted. I dropped to my knees just in time to catch her. She hit me with enough force to knock the breath out of my lungs, arms flung tight around my neck. I'm here, I said into her hair. I'm not going anywhere. Dana stood a few feet away, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, she smiled, small but real, and wiped at one cheek. That night, we lay side by side on my bed. Our bed now, under a cheap, glow-in-the-dark star projector I'd panic bought on the way home. The ceiling shimmered with fake constellations. Maya traced them with her finger in the air. Do you still know the dinosaur song? She asked. Every word, I said. I'm pretty sure that song is hardwired into my brain at this point. She rolled onto her side to face me, serious in a way that made her look older than 7. Can I still call you Aunt Lo? She asked. Or does that have to change now? I swallowed the lump in my throat. You can call me Aunt Lo for as long as you want, I said. Forever. If that feels right. But if someday you ever want to call me Mom, that would be okay, too. Only if you want. Only when you're ready. She didn't answer right away. The projector hummed softly. Outside, a car drove by, its headlights flashing briefly across the ceiling stars. Finally, she scooted closer until her forehead was pressed against my collarbone. Her voice came out so quiet I almost missed it. Okay, she whispered. Mom, it wasn't a magical cure. The next morning, she woke up angry for no visible reason and refused to eat breakfast. A week later, she had a meltdown over a misplaced hairbrush that ended with her sobbing. You're going to leave. Over and over until her voice was raw. Each time, I stayed. I sat on the floor beside her bed. I rubbed circles on her back. I said, I'm here. So many times it became less a sentence and more a rhythm. Like breathing. I thought vengeance would feel like watching Brooke lose. I admit to you now, if you've stayed with me to the end of this story, I thought justice meant her suffering the way I suffered, but sitting there with Maya's small, shaking body pressed against mine, I understood something I never really grasped from the bench. Sometimes vengeance isn't about burning someone else's life down. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them burn down yours. It's about walking back into the fire you escaped, not to punish the arsonist, but to carry out the one person they left inside. If you've ever had to stand alone in a room full of people who called themselves family and tell a truth they didn't want to hear, you know this. It's terrifying. It's lonely. But sometimes, it's the only way to pull a child, or the child you used to be, out of the wreckage. Thank you for watching this story on Vengeance Within. If you believe that standing up for a child's safety is worth losing the approval of people who were supposed to love you, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs courage tonight. And subscribe to Vengeance Within for more raw, honest stories about justice, family, and the quiet kind of revenge that looks a lot like healing.